Please be seated. The Australian Girls Choir will now lead us in the hymn, Here I Am, Lord.
All who dwell
Thank you, girls. That was absolutely beautiful. And also you would have noticed earlier on the Indigenous group who led the official party in. They are the Wiradjuri Echoes. They've provided Aboriginal dance, song and art for almost 2 decades in Canberra and surrounding regions. They are a family group who have brought Aboriginal language and culture into the classroom and community, and we thank you very much for your appearance here today. May I please ask everyone to stand? And let us take a moment now to reflect on Her Majesty's remarkable life. I invite all Australians to join us in 1 minute silence. Thank you. Let us remain standing for the Australian National Anthem, sung by ARIA Award winner and one of Australia's finest voices, Anthony Kalia.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free, with golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea, our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Thank you, Anthony. Please be seated. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Melissa Doyle, your MC on this National Day of Mourning. We are joined this morning by a number of distinguished guests. I acknowledge His Excellency General, the Honourable David Hurley, Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia, and Her Excellency, Mrs. Linda Hurley. The Honourable Anthony Albanese MP, Prime Minister of Australia, and Ms. Jodie Hayden. I also acknowledge state governors, the Administrator of the Northern Territory, Premiers and Chief Ministers, presiding officers, senators and members, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II had a special and enduring relationship with Australia. Over 16 visits, the Queen travelled the length and breadth of our vast continent, touching the lives of millions of Australians as she went. 16 Australian Prime Ministers and 16 Governors-General served during Her Majesty's 70-year reign, and she was patron of so many of our most beloved charities and organisations. The Queen's impact on Australia and Australians was profound. Her long and remarkable chapter of service above self, loyalty and love of the Commonwealth has now closed. We gather here today to reflect upon the life and legacy of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I now invite Auntie Violet Sheridan, Ngunnawal Elder, to deliver her welcome to country.
Queen Elizabeth II became Queen, head of the Commonwealth in 1952 when she was just 25 years old. I can imagine that being a woman as well, taking the lead back in those years, it would have been very hard for her. She first visited our shores in 1954, making almost 100 stops around Australia. During her 2-month journey, the Queen visited our country about 16 times. Queen Elizabeth was a loving mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother. She lived a life of service and was Queen for 70 years. As watching the service, it brought me sadness and made me think about losing my mother. I pay my respects to her family. I would like to acknowledge Their Excellency General, the Honourable David Earley, Mrs Linda Earley, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, and other distinguished guests here today. I would like to pay my respects to my elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here this morning and also around Australia. And I would also like to acknowledge the non-Indigenous people here today and around Australia. In keeping in the general spirit of friendship and reconciliation, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of my family and myself to the land of the Ngunnawal people, who are traditional owners of the land that we meet on. God bless you. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auntie Violet. Well, in 1988, Her Majesty the Queen opened the building in which we now sit. It is where the soul of Australian democracy rests. Let us recall today the Queen's wise words at the opening of this Parliament House.
This is a special occasion for the Parliament, but it is also a very important day for all the people of Australia. After 87 years of federation, a permanent home has been provided for Parliament, which is both the living expression of that federation and the embodiment of the democratic principles of freedom, equality and justice. Parliamentary democracy is a compelling ideal, but it is a fragile institution. It cannot be imposed, and it is only too easily destroyed. It needs the positive dedication of the people as a whole and of their elected representatives to make it work.
I now invite to speak His Excellency General, the Honourable David Hurley, Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia.
Good morning, and I acknowledge that today we're on Ngunnawal country here in Canberra. I do thank the Ngunnawal people for looking after this beautiful part of our country for us for generation after generation. Pay respects to their elders, past and present, and particularly look to the care of their young, who are the pathway to our national future. Could I acknowledge Their Excellencies the Honourable Linda Dessau, Governor of Victoria, the Honourable Margaret Beazley, Governor of New South Wales, the Honourable Barbara Barker, Governor of Tasmania, the Honourable Francis Adamson, Governor of South Australia, the Honourable Dr Jeanette Young, Governor of Queensland, the Honourable Chris Dawson, Governor of Western Australia, and Her Honour, the Honourable Vicky O'Halloran, Administrator of the Northern Territory, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia, Premiers and Chief Ministers, Senator the Honourable Sue Lyons, President of the Senate, and the Honourable Milton Dick, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Susan Kiefel, Chief Justice of Australia, members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Honourable Peter Dutton, Leader of the Opposition, former Governor-Generals of Australia, former Prime Ministers of Australia, former Chief Justices of Australia, General Angus Campbell, our Chief of the Defence Force, senior members of the Australian Defence Force, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a sad day, a day of national mourning. The passing of the Queen, while we knew it to be inevitable, has still struck with an impact that has exceeded any expectation here in Australia, in the United Kingdom, and indeed across the globe. Amongst the sadness, though, it is also a day of reflection and celebration, a day to recognise what it means to have lived in the second Elizabethan age, to ponder what lessons we can and should draw in the months and years to come. History will remember few like Queen Elizabeth II. While we mourn her passing, we are grateful that we have witnessed and benefited from her remarkable life. Linda and I were very conscious in London, as I know other Australians in attendance were, that we were representing millions of Australians who were keenly feeling the loss of Her Majesty, and also of the privilege of being present at such an historic moment. I'm still trying to understand what I, and I dare say we, witnessed and experienced in London last weekend. Something bigger than us, but something very personal. Two moments stand out and have informed my thinking about the days since Her Majesty passed. The first, an early, very cold morning walk to and through Green Park. It was far from the pomp and ceremony of the formal events. In fact, we're in our exercise kit. As we entered Green Park, there was a strong floral scent in the air. Interlaced around the trees and through the park were thousands upon thousands of tributes. Flowers, handwritten messages and other tokens, including a sleuth of Paddington Bears. Even in the early hours, it was crowded. But people weren't taking selfies or posing. They were respectful of each other, but largely contained in their own intimate and individual reflections on a remarkable individual. The second was the moment Her Majesty's casket was lowered into the Royal Vault at St George's Chapel in Windsor. I hadn't thought that I'd be emotional, but I was. She was my Queen. I don't pretend that I have a special relationship with her, though our encounters are now treasured memories, but she was part of my life. She was a constant and reassuring presence in so many people's lives. But in the next moment, God Save the King was sung with gusto. A page had turned, a remarkable chapter complete, the book, though, continuing. From these moments and other experiences over the last 2 weeks, I've observed three consistent complementary themes. First, the respect for Her Majesty as an individual. She was kind, compassionate and warm, and had a knack of putting people instantly at ease and making them feel special. Second, her bond with Australia and Australians. As an example, it was an honour to present recently to Her Majesty, through the then Prince of Wales, a specially commissioned work of art combining the Queen Elizabeth II Rose and the Australian wattle in celebration of her Platinum Jubilee. It was incredibly moving to learn that she retained the painting in her private study in Balmoral during her final weeks. I like to think that in those final days, she may have looked on that painting and reflected on her many visits to Australia and her love of the Australian people. It was a love that was reciprocated by many of us. The final theme that has emerged is an appreciation for the stability and comfort her reign provided. She set an example of servant leadership in the exercise of her influence. In an era where trust in institutions is declining, Queen Elizabeth evolved, adapted and changed within her role as monarch, but ultimately remained true to the commitment she made all those years ago. Throughout all my life and with all my heart, I shall strive to be worthy of your trust. As we have seen during her life and since her passing, Her Majesty had the power to unite us. She provided a common touch point that could overcome divisions and draw people together. This was evident in the diversity of those who responded to her death, young and old, from every continent on earth, in positions of power and influence, and in far greater numbers, everyday people just looking for an outlet to convey their love, respect and simple thanks. In considering the unifying role Her Majesty played, I acknowledge that her passing has prompted different reactions for some in our community. I'm conscious and respect that the response of many First Nations Australians is shaped by our colonial history and broader reconciliation journey. That is a journey we as a nation must complete. And so, to her legacy for us in Australia. I have found myself asking whether the unparalleled reaction of the last 13 days has been just a moment in time, a unique reaction driven by Her Majesty's remarkable life, longevity and service. Or is there a greater lesson to be drawn? I'd suggest that the lesson for us can be found by being both reflective and prospective in our considerations, to look back and admire, and to look ahead and contemplate. As Her Majesty herself said in 2000, we must look forward as well as back. Australia has always been a country on the move and will go on being so. It is not for nothing that the anthem is Advance Australia Fair. Her Majesty shared in Australia's growth and change during her reign. She respected the will of the Australian people. She understood that we are our own people and that we control our destiny. Her Majesty, through her influence, her decency and devotion to others, has set a tone for our progress and change. That example of bringing people together with empathy and respect is one that can guide us into the future. Noting all that changed during the Queen's 70-year reign and all that will change in Australia in the next 70 years, there is a timeless quality that we can draw from Her Majesty. For what did not change were the values and characteristics that Her Majesty lived by from the moment she acceded to the throne as a young adult, becoming monarch with scant preparation, but with a deep reservoir of strength and faith. They were a constant. Her dutiful service wasn't an act, it was who she was. Throughout her reign, she constantly demonstrated tireless and selfless service, devotion to duty and a compassion for others. Her Majesty epitomised servant leadership, and particularly in this age of extreme individualism, set an example of living and serving for something greater than herself. Those are values to which we can ascribe and aspire to. They are as relevant today as they were 70 years ago. They are as relevant in the next 70 years as they are today. That is Her Majesty's enduring gift to us all. And I conclude by recalling the title of the lament played by the Queen's Piper at her funeral service. Sleep, dearie, sleep.
Thank you, Your Excellency. The Queen was a patron of so many of Australia's most vital organisations, including the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. This hospital is renowned for its expert paediatric care and was opened 3 times by Her Majesty the Queen, first in Carlton in 1954 and twice in Parkville in 1963 and in 2011. I invite Dr. Rowena Coates, Chair of the Royal Children's Hospital Board, to read from the Book of Ecclesiastes.
There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet, no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end.
Thank you, Dr. Coots. The Australian Girls Choir is well known for its superb performances and artistic innovation. The choir previously performed for Her Majesty the Queen and His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh during their royal visits to Australia in 2002 and again in 2011. The choir will lead us in Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." Thank you, girls, for sharing your absolutely beautiful voices with us. I now welcome all state governors and the Northern Territory Administrator to say the prayers of the faithful. I invite Her Excellency the Honourable Linda Dessau, Governor of Victoria, Her Excellency the Honourable Margaret Beasley, Governor of New South Wales, Her Excellency the Honourable Barbara Baker, Governor of Tasmania, Her Excellency the Honourable Frances Adamson, Governor of South Australia, Her Excellency the Honourable Dr. Jeanette Young, Governor of Queensland, His Excellency the Honourable Chris Dawson, Governor of Western Australia, Her Honour the Honourable Vicky O'Halloran, Administrator of the Northern Territory.
God of light and life, we thank you for the Queen's encouragement during the time of the pandemic. She spoke of Easter hope and assured us that illness and adversity would not overcome us. Please give us grace to care for the most vulnerable amongst us and all who face an uncertain future. Lord, in your mercy.
God of healing and hope, we thank you for the Queen's support during times of flood. She noted our nation's resolute spirit and community-mindedness and pointed us to the journey ahead. Please give grace to all who are working to restore homes, livelihoods, and communities. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
God, whose love is stronger than death, we thank you for the Queen's faith in you. She was inspired by the life and teachings of Jesus, the Good Shepherd who laid down his life for her. Give us grace to leave her in his tender care, trusting his promise of resurrection life for all who come to him. Lord, in your mercy,
God of all comfort, we pray for all who mourn the Queen, her family and friends, and all who loved and admired her. Casting all our cares on you, may we know the consolation of your love. Give wisdom to those assuming new responsibilities, especially King Charles. May he be upheld by our prayers and your grace. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
God of sea and sky, we thank you for the Queen's support during times of drought and fire. She spoke of her sadness for people who lost so much and praised those who risked their lives to protect others. Please give us grace to preserve and protect your creation for the well-being of all. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
God of the ages, we thank you for the life and work of her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth. In all the changing times of life, she was a constant model of duty and service. Please give us grace to recognise your gifts to her and through her, and to follow the good of her example in the seasons ahead. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
God of faithfulness and truth, we thank you for the Queen's contribution to our diverse community.
She recognised the importance of working together and using our gifts for the common good. Please give us grace to embrace the gifts of our First Nations peoples and all Australians so that we walk together as one. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
Thank you, Your Excellencies and Your Honour. I now invite the Honourable Anthony Albanese, MP, Prime Minister of Australia, to speak.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, parliamentary colleagues, Premiers and Chief Ministers, former Prime Ministers Paul Keating, John Howard, Tony Abbott and Scott Morrison, my fellow Australians. We gather today, here and around our nation, to offer Australia's thanks for an extraordinary life dedicated to service, faith, country and Commonwealth. The minute's silence that we just observed in honour of the Queen was truly a moment of national unity. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was the longest-serving monarch in the history of a centuries-old institution. Her reign spanned more than half the life of our modern federation, and we proudly honour her memory today on a continent home to the world's oldest continuous culture, paying respect to traditional owners and elders past, present and emerging. This National Day of Mourning salutes a sovereign who served our whole nation and sought to know it too. Our vibrant cities, our beautiful country towns, farmlands and forests, rugged coasts and our red centre, mighty stadiums and local sporting grounds, grand galleries and humble halls. Through 16 tours across 7 decades, Queen Elizabeth visited and connected with every part of Australia. Millions of fleeting interactions still fondly recalled. So many Australians have shared their memories of a kind word, a gesture of respect, or a thoughtful act of grace in an always busy day. With Prince Philip at her side, the Queen embraced the scale of this vast nation, the breadth of our continent, the depth of our people's hearts, the warmth of our humour. We can see something of this understanding in the organisations that Her Majesty served as patron. From the RSL, a social focal point for so many towns and suburbs, to the Royal Flying Doctors Service, an essential lifeline for people in the outback whose fortitude the Queen spoke of with such admiration. It is fitting that today's commemorations in our national capital will be mirrored in communities across our country as Australians express their own affection and respect and celebrate the Queen's part in their own stories. Here in Canberra, we are reminded of the Queen's presence in the life of our nation and the world of change that she witnessed. In this very room, indeed right in this spot, in 1988, Queen Elizabeth officially declared this building open. Down the hill is Old Parliament House. The Queen's father opened in 1927. The House of Representatives, in which Prime Minister Menzies fought back tears as he informed the chamber of the death of George VI and the accession of a 25-year-old Princess Elizabeth. the old Senate where the young Queen on her first tour addressed the Australian Parliament summoned in her name, one of only a handful of women in the room at that time. The lake, now home to Queen Elizabeth II Island, was dry for that first visit. The Australian War Memorial had been open for only 13 years. The veterans of the Great War that had inspired its construction were still in their 50s and 60s. The Mint was busily imprinting pounds, shillings and pence with the young sovereign's profile. Television was 2 years away. Britain was our biggest trading partner and our number one source of migration. That Australia of 1954, where 7 million people, think about that, 7 million out of a population of 10 million, or 70%, turned out to welcome the first sovereign to visit these shores. It was, in virtually every respect, a different nation in a different world. Think of the transformation that has redefined our great nation since. Through it all, in the good times and in days of trial and hardship, the Queen, Her Majesty, stood with us, always among the first to extend her sympathies to people and communities afflicted by tragedy or disaster. Always taking pride in Australia's progress, the Queen observed with the thoughtful perspective of decades in public life. In Adelaide in 2002, Her Majesty reflected, "I have witnessed a steady and remarkable evolution in the character of Australia and its people. There has been a growing confidence, an increasingly global outlook, a recognition of the distinctive contribution of Indigenous Australians and the natural realisation that Australians can take on the best in the world and excel. In all things, including our advance to reconciliation, the Queen always wanted the best for our country. She greeted every evolution in our relationship with Britain with good grace and an abiding faith in the judgment of the Australian people. And so, amidst the noise and turbulence of the decades, the Queen endured, and so did Australians' affection for her, our sense of connection to her. Indeed, I believe those two truths run together. Our affection held strong because she did. For so many, for so long, the Queen was a rare and reassuring constant in a world of change. In an age of performative celebrity, the Queen embodied quiet dignity. In an era of fads and fashionable causes, the Queen did not seek to chase the times. Instead, she held to qualities and virtues that are timeless: love of family, loyalty to country, service to community, kindness to those in need, respect for everyone she met. In this, she represented much more than the monarchy. She stood for things that Australians loved and admired most about our own parents and our grandparents: their decency, their wisdom, their patience, their work ethic, their instinct for service above self. And as the traditions and formalities of the past 2 weeks come to a close, I think something all of us can do to meaningfully honour the life of Queen Elizabeth in an ongoing way is to take inspiration from her extraordinary example. Friends and fellow Australians, monuments to the Queen dot our landscape. The name of Elizabeth lives in nearly every city and town. Perhaps the greatest tribute we can offer her family and her memory is not a marble statue or a metal plaque. It is a renewed embrace of service to community, a truer understanding of our duty to others, a stronger commitment to respect for all. This would be the most fitting memorial to a magnificent life of service to others. May Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II rest in eternal peace.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The Honourable Peter Dutton, MP, Leader of the Opposition, will now share his words of support.
Aunty Violet, thank you very much for your words of welcome this morning. I also acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the land on which we meet. Thank you very much, Governor-General, for your words and representing our country with great distinction in the United Kingdom, to Mrs Hurley as well, to the governors, to former Prime Ministers, former Governors-General, to the Premiers and Chief Ministers, to my parliamentary colleagues, past and present, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On this specially designated National Day, Australia stops to remember our dearly departed sovereign. Never in modern history has there been a more dignified monarch, a more dutiful leader, or a more decent human than Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. If grief is the price we pay for love, then the outpouring of global grief in these past 14 days speaks to just how much she was loved. Hers was a truly extraordinary reign, the longest-serving monarch in British history. 70 years of unwavering and impeccable duty, more than 100 countries visited, including our own on 16 occasions. And many thousands of people met, all of whom she listened to attentively and treated as her equal. Succeeding her father, aged just 25 years old, Elizabeth inherited an empire in decline and a country crying out for national meaning in a changing world. Upon one young person, so much was expected by so many. Fate thrust a life of duty upon Elizabeth, but to duty Elizabeth would dedicate her life. She did not look back romantically on empire. Instead, she looked with pragmatism, committing herself to championing the Commonwealth. That equal partnership of nations and races, as she described it, built on friendship, loyalty, and the desire for freedom and peace. Our Queen knew that the path to modernity lay not in an emphasis on the people serving the monarch, rather on being a monarch who tirelessly served the people. Many Australians had the honour to meet the Queen. Many caught a glimpse and exchanged a wave when she toured Australia. Most of us, of course, never met her, and yet she was familiar to us all. On our radios, our televisions, our digital devices, she was a constant, comforting and confidence-inspiring presence. We gravitated to her gentle demeanour. We were drawn to her radiant smile, and we were captivated by her wise words. Her dedication to duty rarely saw her down tools in paving the royal road of service. She regenerated the monarchy, leaving an institution fortified for the future. Aside from our individual memories, how will Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II be remembered in the main? Well, in 2018, she said, and I quote, "Through the many changes I've seen over the years, faith, family and friendship have been not only a constant for me, but a source of personal comfort and reassurance." Indeed, the Queen's Christmas messages over the years imparted the importance of friendship, of family and faith. She said that we all belong to the great brotherhood of man, and that in times of stress and difficulty, remember that we have much more in common than there is dividing us. Seeing the family as the focal point of our existence, she noted that our contribution as parents will be just as important as any made by scientists and engineers. Devoted to her God, Her Majesty aimed to live up to Christianity's ideals, especially forgiveness. But she never judged others, stating, "Whether we believe in God or not, I think most of us have a sense of the spiritual, that recognition of a deeper meaning and purpose in our lives, and I believe that this sense flourishes despite the pressures of our world." More than anything else, I think we will remember our dearly departed sovereign for steadfastly embodying humanity's very best virtues and values: service and sacrifice, fortitude and humility, grace and generosity, forgiveness and empathy. Virtues and values, of course, which we all admire, but which are under pressure in the modern age. Perhaps our Queen's greatest triumph will be a renaissance of these virtues and values as we remember her evermore. May she rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Anthony Kalia is a much-loved Australian songwriter and performer. In 2006, Anthony sang for Her Majesty in Sydney on Commonwealth Day. He will now perform for us You'll Never Walk Alone.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of love. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you never walk alone. You never walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You never walk alone. You never walk alone. You never walk alone. You never walk alone.
Thank you, Anthony, for that moving performance. Thank you. For 70 years, the Queen was the patron of Scouts Australia, I invite members of the Scouts to place the wreaths to begin our floral tribute to Her Majesty the Queen. On her first visit to Australia in 1954, the Queen was gifted a yellow wattle brooch, which she wore again in 1988 when opening this building. I now invite anyone who wishes to place a sprig of wattle in a wreath to please come up in row order as guided by the protocol officers. We are just going to pause the wreath laying for a few moments, but I do invite anyone that yet hasn't had an opportunity to come up, please to do so at the end of our formalities. Please stand for God Save the King. We have now reached the end of today's National Memorial Service. Thank you for joining us here today in remembrance of Her Majesty the Queen. Please remain standing for the departure of the official party.